Right here. The center of mess.
So thank you.
The center of mess.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to see you. Msa is trying to help me here.
No,
But actually,
hold everything there.
yes, actually we can get this better. It's so good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. We have another session. It's session 7 today. Session 7 of our Succeeding in Your Postgraduate Studies series. What do we do? What happened there? Oh yes, it went around. There we go. There we go. Don't worry. On Facebook, there we go. So, it is 4 o'clock, exactly 4 o'clock, and I want us to start. As you know, I'm working on different screens, and I want to make sure that that we are on board. Keep coming to check every 10 minutes, okay? Just to make sure that we are all on board, and our producer will keep checking just to make sure that everything is working fine. I've got like 4 screens in front of me. Thank you so much for joining us. And for the feedback that we're getting, we received your feedback. We received your questions. Remember that your questions, I get them on a day such as this on Sunday. The past 3 a.m. squad, it gets the question, they sort them out, and then they send them to me on Sunday morning. Thank you to the past 3 a.m. squad members, the CEO, Charles Esambil, thank you very much. And my heart goes to your family, Charles, for all that you're going through. I hope you come through strong. But I'm thinking of you and sending you lots of strength. Thank you to Monde and Momo. Thank you for the work that you're doing behind the scenes, collecting the questions and making sure that they're well organized and that I get them on time. I really appreciate your support in this regard. Thank you also to everyone who joins me on these sessions every week. I call on colleagues and friends and people that I trust, people whose work I respect, and I ask them to come with me on these screens so that we can share expertise and share what we can do to assist our students. So thank you very much to everyone. Today, I'll be talking to Professor John Ataguba and Professor Salome Maswime. They are my colleagues here at UCT. I have a tremendous amount of respect for them, and I'm glad that they made the time to talk to me today. We're talking about research design and methodology. It's a big, long, detailed topic. It is not possible that we can complete it in one day. There's lots of other issues that we will handle, and we can deal with we'll deal with part of it today, and we'll deal with part of it next week. So next week we will have another research design and methodology, and I'll brand it specifically so that you can see what we're talking about. But the purpose of the session today is to discuss the various types of research designs that are commonly used, the basic process by which research studies are conducted, the research-related considerations of which researchers should be aware, the manner in which the results of research can be interpreted and disseminated, and the typical pitfalls faced by students when designing and conducting their research projects. It is important that we focus on those pitfalls. We can tell you what are the potential pitfalls that you can fall into. These sessions, of course, are meant for students. They are not meant for researchers who are looking for advice on how to design a study that will win them a tender or start a business. Even if that helps you, that is not our main focus. So if you see us not addressing something that you want, or they told you must put in the tender documents for the research project that you're trying to put, this is not what we are about. Okay, we are helping. We are talking with students. Okay, so but of course, even though these sessions are meant for students, I'm aware that they will benefit more people than postgraduate students. So for all of you who do not conduct research, or perhaps you are not registered for any postgraduate study it is okay to be here with us. This session will assist you in becoming a more educated consumer of research. Because sometimes you don't do research yourself, but you are a consumer of research. Whether you consume that research online or in the newspapers or in the books that you're reading, it is important that you know how to analyze this research that you're getting. Being able to evaluate the appropriateness of a research design or the conclusions drawn from a particular research study is very important, because research today is more and more becoming more accessible to non-researchers. We see research published in many papers, and it's becoming accessible to people who are not researchers. So you need to develop your ability to efficiently and effectively digest and understand the results of a research study, even if you are not a researcher yourself. So this session of today will help you do that. When you read research findings, or when you hear people pronouncing what they found in their research, don't just accept what they tell you and say, but it's research that says so. You should also ask, how did they get to that conclusion? How did they get that finding? What question did they ask? How did they collect their data? What framework? You've got to understand all of that, because research findings, sometimes people treat research as if it's the gospel. Whenever someone says, but this is research, it's as if we must just accept it. There's nothing wrong in asking, but how was that research conducted? Okay? What data did they collect? How did they collect it? Because sometimes it is on that basis that you can say, but I do not believe these findings, or I do not agree with these findings. Or you can say, but you cannot come up with these findings if you collected this kind of data. Okay? You do have a right to ask that. And I mean, there's lots of research that's on education, and oftentimes people don't ask questions. Okay, so you have to ask questions. This person is saying this about learners in township schools. Did they go into the classroom to observe how they learn? So if they say learners in township schools struggle with algebraic expressions, they cannot understand algebraic expressions because of what they eat every morning or don't eat. What did they use to collect that data? If they say they struggle with algebraic expressions, even if their conclusion is they struggle to understand algebraic expressions or to solve algebraic equations, did they go into the classroom, sit at the back and watch the teacher teaching? Or did they, in fact, video learners trying to solve algebraic equations? Or did they talk to teachers? Did they interview teachers? And then on that basis decide that, therefore, learners in township schools can't solve algebraic expressions? You have to ask. Don't just accept that research says learners in township schools can do this, and therefore, that's what it is. We just have to take it. We have to ask questions, okay? Someone says they like my necklace, but actually my t-shirt is much more important. I forgot to show you my t-shirt. Nevertheless, let me continue. So, we're talking about research design and research methodology. And before I invite my two colleagues, I want to just briefly talk about what do we mean really when we talk about a research design. A research design is the overall strategy that you as a researcher choose to integrate the different components of your study in a coherent and logical way. You choose a strategy, right, to bring the different components of your research in a coherent and logical way. That's your strategy. How you ensure that you will effectively address the research problem. Remember that when you start, when we started talking, we said you must have a problem. You have a research problem, you have research questions, right? And then you have your theoretical framework, and then you decide on what kind of data will help you respond to the questions that you have. What kind of data will help you to do that? So you know how you bring the research problem. Your research design constitutes basically the blueprint of the collection, the measurements, and the analysis of data. All right? You've got a research problem, research questions, but your research design is the blueprint of the collection, the measurements, and analysis of data. You don't just do it randomly. You think about what kind of data will help you respond to those questions, or how will you analyze that data? Because you can also collect data, same data, but analyze it differently. So that is broadly your design, an arrangement of conditions or collection. Okay, it's an arrangement of conditions that you put together. All right, you decide what kind of study you are going to do based on the problem that you are asking, all right, that you are exploring, and the questions that you are asking. Of course, all of that is through the lens of your research, of your theoretical framework. The theoretical framework is always the lens through which you look at things, even when you think about what data collection methods you're going to use. I will ask the two colleagues that I'll be inviting today to talk a little bit more about the different research designs they used, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about the methods that they used. But there's variety, and as I said, we're not going to stop today. Of course, someone sent a question, and I want to refer to that question before I go ahead, because I think it is an important question, all right? Someone asked a question. I want to get their name somewhere. There's someone who asked a question about African methodologies. I don't want to not... Yeah, Gia. So Gia said, is it possible that you also touch on Afrocentric theoretical frameworks and paradigms, particularly on the decolonial paradigm and critical race theory? As we apply them, what to look out for and how can they be successfully applied in one's research? I think Gia's question is very, very important, and I want to say something about it now, but I want next week, I want us to focus on Afrocentric theoretical frameworks or race theory. Okay, we're going to focus specifically on that because we are in a country, we are in an African country, the majority of people are black people, and there's a lot of research that's done on black people or about black people or with black people. And sometimes their race is silenced, our culture is silenced, our race is silenced, and it's important to ask, does it matter that this question, that this research is exploring, this problem that is explored is explored in an African country with a history such as ours? Does it matter? How does it shape how we collect data, how we analyze data, and how we talk about our findings, how we write our findings, okay? Can we ignore, can we go on with research that asks questions about what black people do in a country such as ours, but actually silence the fact that they are black and problematize blackness in a context such as ours without problematizing blackness? Is it possible that we can do research in that way, that we don't problematize blackness, we don't problematize our history, we don't problematize what it means, and we go on, and then at the end we make conclusions that create an impression that actually the history that we have doesn't exist, and all these things that we are finding are just happen like in any other country. I don't think so. So I want us to have a specific focus of that research. Is it possible? I want us even to ask a question. What does it mean for a non-African researcher to ask a question that is specific to black people when they are not black? They are not black, they ask a question that is specific to black people. And does it matter? Does it matter that how they do that? Does it matter how they analyze the data? Does it matter what they find? Does it matter how they write about what they find? Because I guess what they find, there isn't anything we can do about it. But does it matter how they write about what they find? Can someone who's not black undertake research on and about black people and claim to understand everything about their experience? Does it matter? Okay? I want us to ask that question, and I want to problematize. And I'm asking this question because I do research. My research is in black schools, particularly in mathematics classrooms where learners learn mathematics in a language that's not their own. And when I write about my research, and in my methodology chapter, I make explicit in my methodology chapter, who am I? The fact that I am black and the fact that I can understand 9 African languages. The reason why I make it explicit is because I want the reader to understand that I'm going to be doing, this is the methodology I'm choosing. I'm doing a case study. It's purposive sampling. I'm working with a particular number of schools. I will be doing interviews, and I understand the languages that the people are speaking. But not only that, I also understand the unspoken language, because we know discourses are not only spoken, they are also unspoken. So we will talk about next week. Today, I want us to focus specifically, because we're introducing this session on research design and methodology. I want to start by calling on Professor Maswime. Professor Maswime, of course, is a professor of global surgery here at UCT. She's got international experience. She's highly respected. I want her to talk to us specifically about her own work, the research design that she has used in her studies, how it has helped her explore the problems that she's asking in her research, and if she's got any tips. I also want her, because global surgery is an interesting area of study, I want her I'm going to start by asking her to tell us a little bit more about what is global surgery, because perhaps somebody will say, why talk about global surgery when people are saying African what? Why are you talking about global surgery? So I'm going to ask Professor Maswime, and I'm going to click here so that Professor Maswime can join us. Professor Maswime, you're gonna ask to be welcomed here. All right, let's see. Professor Swalome Maswime. Professor Maswime is here. Hello, Salome. I just called her. Your iPad. Hey, Salome, how are you?
I'm good.
How are you?
Thank you so much.
Good. Take the volume up.
All right. You can see me clearly as well. Right?
I can see you clearly. You've got better lighting than earlier.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. So I like doing this so that the Twitter colleagues can see you properly. So I don't know if they can. Let's see. Or should I do this? All right. Okay, there we go. All right. So the back one, which one? Salome, tell us a little bit about global surgery. What is global surgery?
Yes. All right, and thank you. And it's gonna build up quite nicely from what you just spoke about, because you know a lot of my research that I started when I was doing my PhD was about cesarean sections, was about women that were dying in South Africa. We looked at particularly women who were dying from complications of cesarean sections in Johannesburg, and from that kind of research, looking at outcomes, descriptive studies, what we found was that women died because of other things that were health system related. And so, you know, the kind of picture that we got was that in certain parts of the world, some people are more likely to die from certain conditions than in other parts of the world. So already it started raising the questions around, you know, though we know the cure of diseases, though we understand how problems, how things are treated, but but people will still die in certain places because of resources. And so that led to, you know, how do we bring this now back to Africa and find our own, you know, answer our own research questions and look at things from a local context. So this led to looking at this problem, not just in cesarean sections, but in other surgical conditions as well. And global surgery is really a discipline that looks at how to improve surgical outcomes, especially in the African context, especially, you know, in places in low and middle income countries. And so global surgery has really been about creating a program through UCT that will look at working with other countries, working in partnership with other institutions that look to improve health outcomes, particularly in people that have had operations or suffer from surgical diseases.
Great. Thank you so much, Salome, for explaining that. I'm sure many people understand why global surgery and why it's important actually to have a professor of global surgery here in the continent. And I guess there aren't many. Are there other professors of global surgery on the continent?
So there are 3 in South Africa. One happens to be in Stellenbosch and one at Wits. But this is all a new field, so we all really moved into this last year, formally into it, and we work quite closely together as well.
Great. Now, Salome, talk to us about the research design that you have used largely in your studies. And therefore what methodologies you've used with that.
Yeah, so my research, because it's mainly about describing outcomes, so we use very simple, you know, it's very simple type of research, but you know, you really want to, you'll choose a certain disease or a certain condition where you're trying to see what were the outcomes of people that, for example, have had this operation. Now you want to look at them maybe within a time frame. So some of them have been really after, whilst they're in hospital, how many of them survived, how many died, how many of them had other complications. And some of them will be follow-up studies where you want to see 30 days later what happened. Now, whilst these are very simple things to do, what makes it special is we do multi-center, multi-country kind of research where you want to look at not just one institution, but what happens in 15 institutions, what happens in different countries, 300 hospitals, for example. When you do that, you start having a bigger, you know, multinational perspective of the problem, and you're able to see the burden of disease, how big the global problem is. And in that, with these kind of findings, you can then advise on policy, on changes to guideline. And you know, this is how a simple type of research, pragmatic research, can be used to inform policy at the end of the day.
So it's basically descriptive research that you've been doing. Basically, your design has been made.
Yes, so mainly just
qualitative research.
Yes, quantitative research, observational studies, descriptive studies.
Okay, all right. And is that that's the most popular way of doing research in your discipline?
Yes. So a lot of the main issue now is, we're quantifying the problem. We're trying to see how big is the problem in Africa. Now that we're starting to get answers, this now leads us to looking at what interventions can be done. So it's a step-by-step process that first quantify, describe. When you've described, then you can compare different, against different institutions, different countries. But as you're doing that, you start seeing some possible solutions, and that leads to interventional studies and moving into more of an experimental design.
Okay, yes. So I hope students out there are getting the point here. So you start by understanding the disease in different contexts.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How different areas deal with it, and then you go on to you quantify. You quantify the problem, and then you can go on to designing interventions that may be, and the interventions may be different for different contexts.
Yes, because what we're trying to run away from is using what worked in Europe in the African context. Because despite all the knowledge we have, the things are not working in our context. So it's the main aim is to now find what works in a South African context, what works in Cape Town versus Limpopo, what, that kind of understanding, which we can only do when we ourselves are doing the research with the correct questions and the correct interpretation.
Great. Salome, thank you very much. I don't know, I sent you some questions, and I don't know if there's any other questions. I want to get on. I can see that it's interesting, people are getting very jittery on Instagram that we are talking health research. They're saying, oh no, come on, talking general, stop telling us about hospitals. Salome, the doctor, ladies and gentlemen, especially, so how can she not? but the scientist as well, and I really, it's always a joy speaking with you, Salome. I'm gonna go on to talk to the people about the difference between research methods and research design. What is a research method and what is a research design? And I'm sure I will call you again next time so that we can talk again on this. And thank you so much for making the time, Salome.
Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you to Professor Maswime. Professor Maswime is absolutely delightful. We love talking to her. One of our professors here at UCT, and always a pleasure talking with him. So with her. So thank you very much. Don't worry about the fact that we are talking about health research. It's part of what we do. We're going to be talking to Professor John Ataguba. John is an economist, but he's also a very interesting economist because he does research. He works in health economics. But here's someone who does interdisciplinary research, and his insights will be very useful. He's also the chair of the research committee in his department, and so he gets a lot of questions on a daily basis to help students, to help researchers, to help academics in his department. So I'm going to ask him the bulk of the questions. But I want to before I call John online, I want to just briefly talk about research design and research methods, because one of the students said, who sent a question, asked that we talk about the differences. What are the differences between research design and research methods? So research design, as I said earlier, research design is the overall structure of the research, Research methods, on the other hand, are the procedures that will be used to collect and analyze data. All right, so you choose a research design, which is the overall structure, the research design that you have chosen dictates sometimes, and in relation with the question that you're asking, dictates the methods, which are the procedures that will be used to collect and analyze data. Research design focuses on what type of study is planned and what kind of results are expected from the research. So when we ask about the research design, we say, but what kind of study have you planned to do in your research design? That's what you're answering. What kind of study? Is it a qualitative study? Is it a quantitative study? That's the easiest way to differentiate sometimes. It's qualitative, quantitative. But for research methods focus on what type of methods are most suitable to collect and analyze the evidence that you need to respond to the questions that you have posed. Okay, you start with the research problem, remember, and the research questions, and your research study, your research design is the overall plan, design, strategy, and it focuses on the type of study planned and what kind of results you expect from the research. But for research methods focus on what type of methods are most suitable. Okay, as I said, you cannot tell me what township mathematics learners can or cannot do if you have never been in their classroom, if you've never engaged with them. If you're only going to be looking at studies that's done by people, then it's a conceptual study. You are doing something else. Okay, so be clear about what is it, what's the question that you're asking, and that the methods that you're using to collect and analyze the data can serve as adequate evidence for the conclusions that you want to come on. Research design, your research design is based on the research question or the research problem that you are posing. So you can't just start a research project by deciding it's going to be a qualitative study when you don't yet have a problem, okay? Or you don't have research questions yet. You must have a research question, a research problem, and research questions, and then say, okay, to be able to explore this research question or this research problem, I'm going to use this particular design, all right? And then the research methods depend on the research design. Okay, so you can't decide that you want to have these research methods if you haven't yet figured out what's the design. Okay, so first of all, you need research problem and then research questions. Those help you decide on the research design. Okay, your research design help you decide on the research methods. Okay, because some of these methods work with a particular design or not. Okay, all right. I want to call on Professor John Ataguba. I want to call John Ataguba, and maybe I should look at the questions that you're asking. And I will call Professor Ataguba. We've got questions that came in. We prioritized the questions that came in that were DM'd during the week. Those are the questions that we prioritize. And I'm going to spend some time with Professor John Ataguba on those. With Professor John, I'm going to start with, students have asked a lot about mixed methods. Maybe Professor John Ataguba can start by explaining to us quantitative and qualitative methods and so on. And we can ask some of the questions that we can explore some of the questions that the students asked here that I have online. He can talk to us about what's a descriptive study, the correlational study, experimental. Some people do reviews. If you do a review, you've got to be clear that it's a review. You never went into the classroom. You reviewed work of people who did research in classrooms. Okay, so you can't talk as if you went into the classroom and then you are telling us about what happened there. You are reviewing work of people. So it's a different kind of design. It's review. It's going to be done properly, systematically, and then it's believable. Remember that at the end of the day, what you do has to be believable. I'm going to call Professor John Ataguba. I hope he's on track to join me online. Professor Ataguba. John Ataguba, there he is. We struggled a bit during the day with his connection. I hope it works better right now, John. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, Prof. I'm not sure you still can see me, but if you can hear me, it will be just good.
I
Can
can't
you
see
hear
you,
me?
but we can hear you. We can hear you. And I'm sure my people on Twitter and Facebook, they do tell me if they can't hear you. At the moment, I haven't seen anyone who says they can't hear you. But please, friends, do shout if you can't hear Professor Ataguba. Professor Ataguba is online. If you can't hear him, let us know so that we can up the volume. They can hear you. So, John.
Great.
Tell us, of course, I have shared with you the questions that we received from Twitter, and I do want us to go there. There are some that are a bit detailed, but can you talk to us about what is a descriptive study? When someone says, I'm doing a descriptive study, what is it? What does it do? Salome said that, she talked about what she does. And she talked a little bit about correlational. What are these designs? Or can you talk to us when you introduce your research methodology course and you talk about research design? Where do you start? John is gone. I'm talking alone. I'm thinking John is quiet. There he is. John is struggling with connection. So we'll see.
I'm very much there. I lost you for a bit, but I'm in.
Can you start? We didn't hear you, John. You disappeared.
Yeah, sorry. Can you go over I lost you in a bit.
Okay. When you introduce a research design and methodology course to your students, give us your first lecture.
That's a very interesting one. Research is a very, very dynamic subject, and that's something we must all learn. The reason why it's dynamic is because we call it research. That is, it has already been searched, so you are researching it. Keep in mind, you're not searching it, you are researching it. So no one comes up with something entirely out of space that no one has ever known. So what we start with when we talk about research is to first of all understand.
Oh, John. John is in Cape Town. If I didn't know, I didn't know better, I would think he's somewhere where there's no network. John, you're back. So, yes, it's not something that's done before. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm back, but my network out. I hope it continues. Usually when I start with research teaching, the first thing you need to understand is, what do you want to answer? What is the problem? Why did you even start out in the first place? And that is determined primarily by the research problem. The research problem would automatically, just like Prof talked about, lend itself to a research problem will lend itself to what the method to approach it will be. So the research question in this case could be a question about finding out.
Yes, John. The research in this case could be about finding out what?
Okay, I'm back again. The research question in this case could be about finding out whether people who smoke a lot are more likely to die of a particular disease. So you're really wondering why is it that people who smoke a lot die of a certain disease? That becomes a problem. So you're trying to figure out how then do you approach that. You begin to think about whether you want to use a qualitative method or a quantitative method. And the choice between these will determine how you can, one, generalize your findings, two, also address policy. Sometimes some people go about finding out something, but there is no policy. You can't, it's not amenable to policy. So you have to think about who would consume.
Oh, John. All right. Whilst I'm calling John, I'm sure you heard that. So when you have your research problem, you then decide whether you want to have a qualitative design or a quantitative design. But it also depends on what you want your research to do. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about the breaking transmission. I'm still not sure what the problem is.
No worries. We'll keep looking for you and every time you disappear.
Okay. Trying to figure out where I was, but basically when you decide on your problem and then you figure out whether you're using qualitative or quantitative, it will determine or rather it will depend a lot on how you want to generalize your study. It's okay, you mustn't generalize your study, okay? Not all studies must be generalized to South Africa or to a certain community, but you could, for instance, pick a case study. Just pick one person, could be a case study, and you study the person or study the case, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So not all research should be generalized. So don't think each research project that gets done has to be generalized. Even case studies tell us something. They educate us about that population and they help us understand the problem better. So that's what Professor John was saying about case studies. We don't all have to do, not all research has to be generalizable. John?
Yes, not all research has to be generalizable, but it's also sometimes some research research might be dictated by one government or by an external party. For instance, someone approaches you as a researcher and say, well, you know what, we've been observing this in this community for a long time. We don't know why this is happening. Can you help us? Then you should keep in mind that whenever you want to approach that research, you're trying to figure out what the problem is and also what the solutions are for the person who wants that or the organization who wants that particular information. But keep in mind, you have to be scientific. I would really, really encourage all researchers to be scientific.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna keep getting John because I think we are getting really, really useful advice, right? It's really useful advice. Sometimes you are tasked, it's commissioned research where you have to do a particular study for a particular problem. So you don't have to worry that you'll be looking at a few cases. It's not the size of the sample that decides whether this is an excellent study or not. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm back again. Keeps cutting me after a few seconds.
I want to, because I see that we are at 20 minutes. I want to, and there are questions I see here on Twitter, people asking the same question about mixed methods. Okay, so you're talking about you can make a choice between qualitative and quantitative. All right. Some people say I'm using both.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk to us about that?
Quickly, a mixed method approach is a very, very important one, given that not all research questions can be answered quantitatively. Similarly, not all research questions can be answered quantitatively.
Okay, John has disappeared again. Don't worry, we're gonna get him, right? The short answer to this is it is possible and sometimes advisable, sometimes necessary to have mixed methods. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm back again. So for instance, some questions are particularly suited for amenable to quantitative measures, while others are basically qualitative. By and large, I would stress that most qualitative studies cannot be generalized externally. However, quantitative methods, because of the nature in which sampling is done, if you do it right, you can speak to an a broader population as opposed to just the sample that you collected. But you need very good statisticians to help you there. So the importance of merging both qualitative and quantitative is to complement answer questions that you were not able to answer using one method and use the other method to provide those answers. Then your research is rich.
Yeah. So which means I can't just go around interviewing students in Kailicha and then from that qualitative data and analysis end up saying all township learners are like this. Right? So the qualitative research, you can collect with a specified sample, a case, like that, and then end up making sweeping statements about a population, right? That's very important in this regard. Otherwise, you are misleading people. You didn't do a large qualitative study. John, we back.
Yes, I'm back. Am I speaking on the qualitative and quanti methods?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So with the quantitative methods, which I use, most of my studies, I use quantitative methods. It's not by because I was trained as an economist, but recently, because of my involvement within the health sciences, I have also tried as much as possible to learn and use qualitative methods to help answer questions like why.
Yes.
Because you cannot answer questions like why is it that something happens with quantitative. And unfortunately, you get a lot of researchers who try to answer that why question using quantitative measures. It doesn't give you that reach.
Good point. Good point. We're going to get John again. Did you hear that? Quantitative methods do not make it possible for you to answer the question why. When you want to answer the question why, qualitative methods are much more useful. All right? So you want to know why, then qualitative methods are useful. John?
Yes. And if you also
No.
quantitative,
you can. So wait, John. Someone is getting it wrong. Patience Kutzer is getting it wrong on Twitter. What Professor Ataguba is saying is that quantitative methods do not make it easy for you to answer the question why. If you want to answer the question why, then you need qualitative methods. Right, John?
Yes. In many instances, if you want to deeply answer that question why, you need qualitative. The quantitative methods can answer a few bit of things around why, but it doesn't go deep. You can't see experiences. You can't measure experiences. You can only take frequencies and.
Okay, let me call John again. Very useful teaching by John. And John, you once you finish that, so people are saying when you do mixed methods, is it because you want to understand both the what and the why?
Correct. Sometimes you want to know, you mustn't know all of them, depending on what your questions are. Sometimes different researchers feed into themselves. For instance, quantitative researchers might answer, what is this? And then quantify it, and then leave it on to the qualitative researchers to explain why, using qualitative methods. And that's the complementarity that is very important in research between the qualitative and quantitative researchers.
Exactly. So they are not in conflict. They can be complementary. They do different things, right? Some people
Correct.
I see here on Instagram, some people are throwing questions there that say, well, quantitative methods are conservative, positivistic, what. You must always use qualitative. It's not either or. It's about what's the problem that you are exploring and what's the question that you want answered. All right? So don't go by qualitative methods are always the best or quantitative methods are always the best. Go by what's the problem? What's the question that you want answered? It is that will direct you what methodology. If you want to answer the question why, then you go for qualitative. John, you're back.
Yes, I'm back. What some quantitative scientists are doing now is to use what we call experimental methods to help them tease that why a bit. They try to use that. In the field of economics, for instance, you find people who use experimental methods like the randomized control trials, which is borrowed from health sciences. So what they do is they basically put people into two groups. One is a group that receives an intervention. The other group is a control group without an intervention, to now figure out the difference in an outcome. The outcome in this case might be a particular.
Okay, Professor John, it's disappeared. We're gonna get him now. Don't worry. We have a bit of time and we'll keep getting John. Okay, don't worry. I see people on Twitter are saying I should call John back. John will definitely be back next week because next week we're continuing with research methodology. John?
Yes.
People are asking you to come back next week. We're gonna sort this network thing out, and you'll
Better.
be back next week.
Okay, I would like that. I would like that. It cuts me out after a certain number of seconds, so I don't know why it's a rhythm. I'll try and figure that out.
Keep calling you back. I want you to answer some of these questions that we have. We're busy with the mixed method one, and you were explaining some of the approaches that health sciences people are using now.
Yes, we call the randomized control trial what usually gold standard. So if you can randomize in a very scientific way, randomize people into two groups, the treatment and the control, then the whole idea is the difference in the.
Yeah, we chatted a lot with John before he started. So when he comes in, I'm gonna ask him just to go in, and then I want you to answer one more question. Two more questions on my list. John, hear it, John. Hello, John. John, I can see you're connecting. Are you there, John? All right, we're gonna try him again. Let's see. There he is. Don't worry, Professor John Ataguba is going to come back next week, but we're going to use the minutes that are left. We're going to make the most. John, are you back?
I'm back. So let me quickly let me get on with it. So now the difference in the outcome between the treated group and the non-treated group, which is called the control, is attributed to the intervention. And that can only be true if so many conditions are held. And the first one we always think about is that the randomization is a good randomization, such that the differences in pre-observed and also unobserved characteristics of these two groups are the same, such that the only difference between them will be the outcome that emerges between the two groups. But I have used what we call quasi-experimental methods. Quasi-experimental methods are similar to experimental. The only difference is that we don't do the randomization. We use our data that we have.
Quasi-experimental methods that Professor Ataguba is using. We want him to tell us how he is using them. We want Professor Ataguba to tell us. Celeste on Twitter.
I'm back.
Yeah, go ahead. Quasi-experimental. Tell us how you use them.
Yeah, there are quasi-experimental methods, and there are many of them. If you're an economist, you would have heard a few. I can list them, but not to bore people who are non-economists or statisticians. We have one is the propensity score matching, where we basically try to create what we call propensity scores and match people and divide them into treatment and non-treated groups. And then there's what we call the instrumental variable approach, where we generate what we call an instrumental variable to help us to we call it identification, to identify the outcome between the treated and the non-treated, and so many other ways that we can approach them. The quasi-experimental methods have been used likely because we may not be able to ethically do.
All right, Johnny's cut again. Oh, my patients today, I am impressed. I'm impressed with my patients. It's because John is so good. We have to let him come on again. Yes, John.
Yes, I'm back. So the reason is that, think about it. Imagine we already have something very good that we want the whole of South Africans to have. Does it make sense to put some people into treated? Some people will give that thing, and then some people we don't give that thing. It's going to be very unethical. Nobody likes that. If something is good for society, you want everyone to have it. So in that case, you cannot use an experimental method. So you want a quasi-experimental method. If you have a good supervisor, which I know you all have, the supervisor will guide you through the processes. It's very, very useful to have a good supervisor because they've gone through this. They are like people who have known what exists out there and can point you to good resources.
Great. So we have 5 minutes, and I'm going to call John for the last time, right? And after that, I'll tell you what's coming up. It is session 7 today, and I'll tell you what's coming up. John, you have 5 minutes.
Yes.
You want to wrap that up?
Yeah, I can wrap that up.
I'm worried that we have this question that was asked by Derek on Twitter that I sent it to you, and as well as Joe Man. And given what you do in the faculty, I thought it may be good to answer Derek, who is doing a PhD in public health.
Yes, thank you very much. Derek, quickly, I see you're doing a PhD in public health, which is great. Congratulations. That's my department. You talked about not being able to finish off your sampling. There are many ways around this. And the first thing I will tell you is to speak to your supervisor. But from my side, what I would say is that you could use your few sample to write up what we call preliminary findings.
All right, we're going to call John again, right? What we're doing is answering Derek, whose research, is affected by the lockdown, and he's doing research on public health. And John is providing some advice on that, and it might like to go ahead, John.
Yeah, so you might have what we call preliminary findings. Keep in mind, we talked about generalization. In your case, you will not be able to generalize unless you extend that. But post-COVID, you could think of ways of collecting the data or even during COVID without necessarily seeing the patient. There are many electronic formats for collecting data. Perhaps it is now time to explore this. You might bump up your sample size a little bit because of you face low response rates with technology. You're definitely going to face a lower response rate. So you want to bump up your required sample and then think of innovative ways of collecting that information. Then the other person, Joe Man, in my own case, I would really advise you to speak to your supervisor because you're talking here about.
All right, Joe Man, we saw your question on Twitter. Advice is for you to talk to your supervisor. Your question is about questionnaires. I advise that you speak to your supervisor. Now, I can see that we've got 1 minute, 15 seconds before we finish our hour for today. I don't want us to go beyond 1 hour. We're going to talk again next week about research design and methodology. I want us to talk about the issues I raised earlier. We will get Professor Jonathan Guba back. But here's the thing. Next week is session 8. In the last 2 sessions, I want to use one session so that we talk to people who mark your research proposals so that they can tell you what makes a good proposal as a whole, what makes a bad proposal, because they have looked at many proposals examining them, deciding which one passes, which one doesn't. I'm going to be calling them one by one. They can give you the lowdown so that you are clued in. Hey, Wena, Deputy Mother is getting you within. We are within. You are connected. You are going to make it to masters and PhD. Don't worry. You do your part.